Good morning. My name's Will. I am the lead pastor here, and we're walking through a series called TechWise, and we're going to continue walking through that in just a moment, but I want to spend about 4 minutes talking about the United Methodist Church, if that's all right with you. In this season of renewal, our church, Powell Church, has been led by this vision of we is greater than me. You've seen it on the stage just a moment ago. You can find it on many fine products out in guest services, short sleeve t-shirts and long sleeve t-shirts and bracelets and all that good stuff that 100% of which goes toward our benevolence fund. And so we is greater than me, and this we, of course, includes all the different persons and all the different perspectives that help make up Powell Church and help make us who we are. When Alex and I came here, 7 months ago now and started asking, what is the DNA of Powell Church? And who are we and what is our culture? The number one answer that we got is that this is a come as you are church. And it's been really thrilling to see that in action every Sunday, every Thursday, when we seek to meet people where they are and surround every single one of us in the love of Christ. And so I hope we are, as a church, as the New Testament invites us to be, which is one body with many, many members. Now, Powell Church is also a United Methodist congregation, and this year, as you may know, some United Methodist churches are choosing to disaffiliate from the denomination over issues related to human sexuality. In the U.S., that's about 6% of United Methodist churches. Here in the Holston Conference, that's East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia, it's about 15% of churches. In our district in the Knoxville area, it's less than 10% of churches. So let me just say a couple things. Powell Church is not currently in any disaffiliation process, and no church is required to vote on anything at this time. We'll send out tomorrow in a newsletter. There's a good frequently asked questions that we can point you to. If you've got questions about things on the denominational level, if you've got questions about our language on human sexuality, we'll point you in those directions. General Conference, which is the denomination's top decision-making body, meets again in April of next year, and we'll keep you updated for any information following that gathering. Here, on our local level, we want to create space for healthy conversation. And so if you've got questions about the logistics of being a United Methodist Church or the details of this conversation, we're going to have an information session in a couple weeks. That's February 19th, right after our 11 a.m. worship service. It's just an informal gathering to share more details on some of these conversations and to allow a safe space for questions. And let me say, from a beliefs standpoint, we plan to spend time this year walking through on Sundays a series on human sexuality because we believe that church is a good place to talk about meaningful things. And there is little in life, as you know, that is more meaningful or more beautiful or more sacred or more mysterious than sexuality. Our language, the United Methodist language on sexuality, begins with, we affirm that sexuality is God's good gift to all persons. We call everyone to responsible stewardship of this sacred gift. But more than anything, we want to continue to be a place that is about Jesus and seeks to put him in the center of everything we do and have everything revolve around that space. We are at our best when we operate that way. And so we're incredibly grateful for the ways we see God at work in our church, and we're grateful that you, all of you, in many different ways are part of our we, and we look forward to what God has in store for us as Powell Church and walking through that together. Yeah? All right. Now, we are walking through a series called TechWise. We started this last week, and this is based on a book by Andy Crouch, who writes this book essentially to ask, what is a family for? What is a household for? And how can we, as we shared last week, be places where we invite and inspire both wisdom and courage, to invite our children of all ages to make good choices. And not just a good choice as opposed to a bad choice, but when we talk about good, to make choices that are connected to good news, to make choices that are connected to the goodness that God has for our lives. But the book is a lot about technology because it's not that technology inherently is bad or that technology inherently causes us to make bad choices. It's that there's something about technology that can dull our senses to what wisdom and courage even look like. And so we're walking through this series. We got all kinds of small groups that are walking through it. Our youth are walking through the youth version of it. We're really excited to be doing this together during Lent. We're challenging everyone in our church to take one consistent, meaningful, screen-free hour every day during Lent. It's been very exciting for us to hear you this week. Either one, tell us how much you hate that idea. It's really great. It's exactly what we were going for. And then also to hear the genuine conversation of like, what if we took, not everyone in the church is taking the same hour, but everyone in your household should take the same hour. So we've really enjoyed hearing conversations between spouses and parents and kids of like, what about 10 to 11 or what about 5 to 6, whatever. That starts Ash Wednesday, which is February 22nd. So you've still got 2.5 weeks to figure that part out. But we're really excited about whether you're in a small group or here on Sundays or our youth or taking this challenge during Lent together. We're really excited about walking together through this as the we of us. But Andy Crouch asks this question when we talk about the ways that technology can just kind of dull our senses to what something even is, to what wisdom and courage even are. Andy Crouch invites us to consider the question, what's in the center of your home? So, I mean, we talk about, right, we want Jesus to be in the center of our lives, the center of our church, all of that stuff. How do we see that play out in our homes? What's in the center? If you consider the center of your home, what's there? What's in the center of your home? Because for a long time, the answer to that question used to be this. For a long period in human history, what was in the center of your home was a fireplace or a hearth. And it was a space where lots of different things happened by necessity. It gave you light, it gave you warmth, and it was a place where meals had to be prepared, so it provided sustenance and energy. And for a time, for human beings, all three of those things, light, heat, food, happened in this space. So the center of our homes as people for a time were all gathered in this one area doing essential features of being a person. And so it created this dynamic in our households that we were all gathered around something that was indeed very good. I mean, even now, it's pretty good, right? Like you can almost hear it. If I'm quiet and you look at it long enough, you might even be able to imagine that sound is coming off of that thing, right? It's not, but you can imagine that it is. So for a long time, that was the answer. Now, I don't know how many of you have a fireplace or don't. Alex and I used to live in a house that had a fireplace. The house we have now does not have a fireplace. But here's the truth. For most of us, if not every single person in this room today, the center of our home is not this because we've advanced in part. Now we don't need this for light because we got Thomas Edison and all this good stuff going on. We don't need this for heat, and it's been replaced by something that doesn't look nearly as cool as this, but probably hides in your garage or in your basement, that heats your whole house. And I don't know if any of us in this room, the last time you've tried cooking indoors on a fireplace was, but probably not, right? We've got stoves and even microwaves and all that stuff. Now, we are not here this morning to call electricity or your furnace or your oven bad. Those are good things. But what's happened is, as the centrality of our homes and our lives, there in that space, have moved away from this, it's invited other things to take that place in the center of our lives. And I bet if we're honest with each other, and this is church, you shouldn't lie here, if we're honest with each other, the center of your home now, for most of us, I'm willing to bet is the room with the biggest TV in it. Now again, we have a TV too. Like TVs by themselves are not inherently bad, but something Andy Crouch argues in this book, something has happened in that flip where the center of the home used to be a place where essential human functions happened: light, heat, food, and they were all endeavors that invited creation. You had to work to keep this going. You had to create these meals. You had to work. The center of homes used to be a place where things were created. And even as society and technology have advanced in ways we would not call bad, what's happened is slowly, subtly, and kind of the way technology works, what's in the center of our homes now can tend to be a thing not where things get created, but where things get consumed. And if you, probably like us, are defined by the center of my home as the place where the largest television is, our ratio and our balance of creating to consuming can get askew. We think about it sometimes this way in our house. We've got an open floor plan, so we've got kitchen, living room, and kitchen table are kind of all in one space, which has its pros and cons. But a lot of times the choice that ends up getting made in our house is, here's the spectrum. Home-cooked meal at the kitchen table, Chinese takeout on the couch in front of TV. And there's this creating versus consuming space of the steak's been in the fridge and the marinade all day, and the potatoes didn't come from a box. They came from potatoes, and they were mashed with a real potato masher, and the green beans have got some other stuff in there mixed in. They're not just green beans, and my wife does a great job putting all that together, and then I get to throw it on the grill and do all this stuff, and then we sit down at the table with the TV turned off. That's one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is we don't have any energy for any of that. And let's sit on the couch and order pizza or takeout. And please hear me say, this is church, you shouldn't lie. We live on this side more than we live on this side. Amen, yeah? Now, again, when we talk about some words that we use a lot, like holy, sometimes the takeout on the couch is holy. If you do it on purpose, like if you plan pizza night with your family, with your kids, and you do all that, and you make it intentional and set apart, that can be as good as anything else. Or let's just be honest, some days when we get home, we're done. We're done, right? And that becomes the safe space that we can go because we have used all of our creative energy. So the question is not, this is always good and this is always bad. Pizza is also not bad, right? The question is not, this is always good and this is always bad. We're not here to be Pharisees. We're not here to make this about religion. The question is to ask, what is the balance in the center of our homes and the center of our lives between creating and consuming? And it is, at least for us, it's very tempting to fall into habits where our homes become places where we spend most of our time, and we spend most of our time in our homes in a space where things get consumed, even and including meals that we did not help create. And the more and more it becomes about the one, the harder it is to rediscover something I think is at the core of what it means to be a person. Because if we take our story all the way back, at the core of what it means to be a person, we will find a direct link, the first link, to creation. We take our story all the way back. As you may know, here's how it begins. This is Genesis 1:1. If you've got a Bible, I've got a Bible too, but we might know this one by heart. The story starts this way. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. Now, there's more to that sentence that follows and all that good stuff, but just here, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. A lot of time in church history and churches and religion classrooms and whatever has been spent considering this verse through the lens of when. How long ago was this? Was it 6,000 years ago because God did everything in literal 24-hour days? Or was it millions and billions of years ago based on what this is telling us? Or how do we understand and reconcile those things? And those are all really interesting rabbit holes to get in. But the lens of this, the thrust of this, was never meant to be about when first. Like any sentence, we should start with what is the subject and what is the verb. And the first subject and verb of the Bible is God created. The first truth about God is that God is a creator. That's how the story begins. That's how the story starts. That this God, the first thing our story wants you to know about this God is that this God created the heavens and the earth. This God is a creator. In the story we're given, that's been true about God longer than anything else has been true about God. That this God foundationally is a creator. Now, in Genesis 1, you and me don't come around for another 25 verses, and that's probably a good thing. If the Bible started with us in verse 1, we might have that out of order. Yeah? The Bible starts with God, and in fact, human beings are the last thing created, but when you and I are created, we get very specific language about us that's unique to us as well. Here's a few verses later in verse 26. The sixth day, God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and the cattle and all the wild animals of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. So, the first thing that's true about God is that God creates, but the first thing that's true about you is that you are created in the image of God. You, yes, you, and me, and every one of us is created in the image of God. And that has been true about you longer than anything else that's been true about you. It is the foundational truth of being a person. And while dogs and cats and trees and rocks and sunsets and stars are created and called good and beautiful and all of that good stuff, it's only you and me that are created in the image of God. That's the first truth about you. And when you consider all the other ways that we define ourselves and identify ourselves and all of those things, the foundational truth in our story is that a person is created in the image of God. That's you. And that's your kids and your parents and the people you love. All of those people are created in the image of God, and that is the foundational truth of their existence. Do you know who else that's true for? The guy you didn't vote for is created in the image of God. Your ex, you may have some good arguments. Your ex is created in the image of God. That person who owes you an apology, they owe you an apology, and they're not going to give it to you. They're created in the image of God. Even referees, who I thought did a fine job yesterday. Referees and umpires are created in the image of God. And sometimes, whether it's at Thompson Bowling or your local Little League ballpark, sometimes referees and umpires look much more like the image of God than the rest of us sitting around talking about them. Hey, that's a tough amen, Lucille, but it's true. Yeah. I had my 5-year-old with me at the ball game yesterday, and again, I thought they were very excellent and fair, and so that helped me a little yesterday with that whole business. Whoever, wherever, no qualifiers. The foundational truth of being a person is that we are created in the image of God. But here's the thing. If the first truth about God is that God creates, and the first truth about you and me is that we are created in the image of God, then in some way, you and I are created in the image of a creator, and that means you and I are created to create. Not just, biology would tell us, and I mean, this is not wrong, biology would tell us that we're created to reproduce, but anything can reproduce if it's living. You and I are not just created to reproduce. You and I are created to create. And the thing about this, and the thing about your TV, and the thing about what's in the center of our homes is that it can subtly, but over time significantly, throw off our balance of creating versus consuming. And it's not that over here is all good and over here is all bad, but to create is tied more into what it means to be a person in Scripture than what it is to consume. Consuming is something we have to do and is necessary, and again, is even good. But we are called first and foremost not to consume, but to create. And there's something good about that, and something I think that should cause us to reevaluate what's in the center of our homes. Because here's the thing. The point of this sermon is not to go home and say, look, what's the practical application? You need to go home and throw away your TV and start building a fireplace. No. I mean, if you want to, great. Come tell me about it. But that's not what I'm asking you to do. We still have a TV, and we don't have a fireplace. The point is not going back. Our job is not to go back to the 1800s, and our job is not to go back to the Garden of Eden. From the beginning, God has called this thing to move forward. God creates and then creates people to carry on that work. And let's be clear, in some ways, we haven't done such a great job. But in some ways, we're doing all right. If you had coffee on the way in this morning, or you had it out there, ain't no coffee in the Garden of Eden, baby. As Andy Crouch says this in one of his other books, actually. God creates all these things and calls them good, but consider our role in this work. The egg is good, but the omelet is very good. Eggs are especially good right now, given the price of eggs. The egg is good, but the omelet is very good. God did not bequeath us omelets or coffee, but God did give us the ingredients and the tools and the creative spark to carry it forward. And we are people in large need of grace, but in a sense, that's the work we've been about. And so God gave us eggs and we made omelets, and God gave us plants and we made coffee, and God put rhythm in the human heart and we made rock and roll, baby. We are created to create. And that is a process that every one of us is invited into. See, the work of creation is not limited to people who have a humanities degree or right brain thinkers. You may look at your life or yourself or your interests and say, I'm not a very creative person. And I would challenge that by saying, I would just think you might be looking at creativity with too narrow a focus. An assembly line is creation. And if an assembly line doesn't do it for you, then we're invited and inspired to find other things that do. Because the first truth about God is that God creates, and the first truth about you is that you're made in the image of that creator. So you and I, on some fundamental level, are created to create. It's the work of being a person, is to help take this world that God created and called good, and then take what we've been given and take the divine spark and the image of God that we've been given for creation and to call it forward. And so the good question for this morning is, what's our ratio in our everyday lives in a normal week, whatever a normal week is for you? What's your ratio of creating to consuming? And let me say, if you work a job where you create a lot professionally, that may tend to lend itself much more to the pizza and the couch at the end of the day. We still need to consume. It's also basic truth. If you don't consume, you will die. But what's our ratio? What's our understanding of what we create versus what we consume in our lives? And how is your living room, or whatever the place is where you consider the center of your home to be, how do our living rooms tell that story? When you look around what's in the center of your house, What do you see? Chances are, too, you probably see a lot of things trying to happen at once, like work, and quiet time, and food, and entertainment, and all kinds of different stuff a lot of times for us can happen in the same space. But remember, even that is not a bad thing, because all kinds of things used to happen around this. They were just things that helped, no pun intended, fan the flame of our creative energies, our own design in the image of a creator. And technology, whether it's your TV or not, technology can distract us from that call and loop us into patterns where we consume far more than we create. And again, with technology, it usually happens slowly and subtly until we don't even really realize it anymore. But the first truth about God is that God creates. And the first truth about you and me is that we are created in the image of God. And so on some level, you and I, we're not just created to reproduce, but we're created to create. How do the places we spend the most amount of our time and energy, even with the people we love, reflect that ratio? Because from the beginning, it has always been better to create than to consume.